Samson's story is one I've come to see differently over the years. As a child, I was drawn to the spectacle, his strength, his prowess and fearlessness, and his ultimate act of sacrifice. As I've gotten older, though, I no longer see Samson's story as one of supernatural strength, but one that is all about human flaws and weakness. From the start, Samson was set apart as a Nazirite dedicated to God. That vow came with specific commitments. He would not drink wine, he would have no contact with anything unclean, and no razor would ever touch his head. It was from this sacred commitment that his real strength came from. But as his story unfolds, we see how his own impulses were more important to him than his vows as a Nazirite. Take his first marriage, he has no concern over the woman's character or her values. He sees a Philistine woman and tells his parents, she looks good to me. Judges 14:3. The decision is purely visual, entirely lacking in real discernment, wisdom, or deference to the cultural norms of his people. And despite the hesitation of his parents, he insists. This becomes a pattern. Samson follows his eyes and his appetites rather than his calling. The moment with the lion is another turning point. After killing it, he returns to find bees have made a hive in its carcass. Judges 14:4-5. He reaches in and eats the honey, breaking his vow of never touching any dead or unclean thing. He then shares it with his parents without telling them where it came from. It wasn't enough that he would desecrate himself with his impulsive actions, but he thoughtlessly desecrated his parents in this act as well. At his wedding feast, he mocks the Philistines with a riddle they couldn't possibly answer. Judges 14:12. He's so sure they can't figure it out that he makes a wager for 12 sets of clothes, promising to give them to his friends. When the Philistines trick his wife into revealing it, he flies into a rage and kills 30 men in a neighboring Philistine village, taking their clothes to cover the bet. These aren't the actions of someone led by the Spirit of the Lord. Infuriated with his wife for giving away the secret, he gives her away to a friend of his, treating her like property. Worse yet, he ends up making the same exact mistake with his second wife, Delilah, Judges 16:19-21. When she presses him to divulge the source of his strength, he ultimately gives the secret away to her, even though he should have learned well before that point that she was not trustworthy. I think this is a powerful lesson in the very human flaw of repeating the same mistakes time and time again, thinking for some reason that the outcome will be different somehow. After his capture, blinded and humiliated, Samson prays for God's strength to return. Judges 16:28-31. What is interesting about this part of the story is his motivation for seeking God's help. It's not about protecting Israel from Philistia. It's not even about destroying the idolatrous enemies of God. He asks for vengeance, for strength to strike back, because they blinded him. That's the final act of the strongest man in the Bible. Not a redemptive sacrifice, but revenge for an injury inflicted upon him. An especially terrible injury for a man who makes judgments entirely based upon how something looks, evidenced by his choice in wives. Also, an injury that, to be frank, was a result of his own foolishness. And yet, God gives him that strength. This is the main thing I take away. God used Samson anyway, not because he was righteous, not because he humbled himself, but because God's plan isn't limited by the shortfalls of man. He works through deeply flawed people, and that should encourage us. Still, there's something sobering in that. God may use us, but if we don't surrender, we'll never become what we are meant to be. Samson could have been more than a warning. He could have been a righteous deliverer like many of the judges that came before him. His story reminds me that obedience matters, not for God's sake, but for ours. The more our will aligns with His, the more clearly we reflect His strength. But even when it doesn't, even when we get it wrong, He's still capable of finishing the story.